Hello and welcome to Marney Reid Presents Connect to Develop, where professionals come to connect with our guests, get tips on professional development, and to be inspired. I'm your hostess, Marney, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Maryrose Burns, Regional Vice President of VanEck Securities. And our topic today is pitching the room, appealing to each key stakeholder. I may or may not have crafted a title around Maryrose, who played Division I college softball and has probably actually played softball for many years longer than I've actually known her. So Maryrose, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Marney, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on Connect to Develop. Super excited about the opportunities you're giving all of us to inside peek to your network and the great inspiration that it can bring.
Thanks so much for joining, Maryrose, and very excited to have you here. Typically, I interface with a lot of medical professionals, from surgeons to executives, and having someone in the securities industry and one of the youngest regional vice presidents to be promoted within your company is exciting. Current roles and responsibilities are that Maryrose works among multiple different states with client retention, so talking with existing clients and making sure they understand the full suite of services in their portfolio, as well as educating them on new products coming in, as well as new client acquisition. Always have to be building the pipeline, right? And collaborating with your peers to make sure that everyone understands the latest and greatest in securities. What's exciting is you don't see this too often, and I'm not making a jab at millennials at all, but Maryrose started a month after graduating college and has worked in various different roles. And like I said earlier, is one of the youngest to be promoted to a regional vice president. So let's dig in today, Maryrose. The topic at hand is pitching the room, appealing to each key stakeholder. Can you talk to me a little bit about what this concept is as a professional, both with internal facing stakeholders as well as the customers, in other words, external facing ones?
Yeah, absolutely, Marney. And I think it's such an important topic that really goes across the roles at an organization. No matter what you do, whether it's HR, marketing, accounting, you're in a sales role like myself, you're going to be put in a room to advocate for something that you want, whether that is an increase to your budget, self-promotion for that raise that you're looking for, or if you happen to be in a client-facing role like myself, actually appealing to clients to use your product or services. I would say my key to appealing to each key stakeholder is preparation, preparation, preparation. Benjamin Franklin has a great quote of failure to prepare is preparing to fail. And I think that quote is so true when it comes to preparing for these important, crucial conversations that are not only going to help you advance in your career, but close the deal in certain instances.
So I love that quote. I hope that if I ever do prepare to fail, that it is one of the biggest epic failures that we've ever seen. But let's get back to the winning portion, right? As a person that oftentimes is asking for the resources, the promotion, if you're looking at internal, can you talk about the role and maybe even make a little bit of analogy to the pitcher's role in a softball game of preparation? And sometimes even while it may not seem like you're driving the ship, how you have to steer conversations. And even if that means steering people into championing or supporting or even sometimes throwing out ideas first so that your goals all move forward at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sports can be a great analogy for many things. I would say any college athlete would probably agree with you. One of the biggest jumps that happens from playing high school or recreational sports to college athletics is the amount of preparation that goes into it. So I'll give you a quick analogy in terms of a game plan, and that can relate to preparing for conversations with key stakeholders. So if you're a pitcher in college softball, baseball, and this can go across different sports, when we review the lineup or what we potentially will see batter by batter, you look at their weaknesses, their averages. If we can look at past film, where they tend to be strike out, what's the weakest part of their swing, and coaching staffs and pitchers and catchers can review all that. Then it comes game time. you're going to create a game plan that is tailored to each batter of what you're going to do when put into given scenarios. So if you go up early in an 0-2 count, you can go to a pitch that maybe is your go-to pitch, that maybe it's going to be a ball and you have a little bit more flexibility. But if you get in those crucial situations like a 3-2 count and it comes down to either the batter putting the ball in play, walking them, or striking them out, you really want to have a game plan in place to be able to have confidence going into that decision. And it's no different when having these conversations with key stakeholders. So I think number one, you have to identify within the room who's the decision maker, what's the arrow in their back, so to speak. Why are they even talking to you? What are you going to do to help them in their problem, and what solution you're going to present? And then from there, you have to prepare for all scenarios. So I know in my organization, we do a lot of presentation preparation. And in that, it's sometimes tedious, and it is an anxiety building exercise to present in front of your peers, but ultimately it makes you better. So one of the things that we tend to do is we role play, in a sense that, what if the client wants you to do a full 15-minute presentation, a 5-minute one-on-one, or a 2-minute condensed presentation? And what that allows you to do is be flexible to what the client is wanting in the time frame that they have. And Marnie, you can talk to this a lot, and we've talked about this a lot in the past, is once you get higher up in an organization, leaders do not have the luxury of time. So when you get in front of these key leaders, you need to realize that their time is very precious, and you need to capitalize on that time by being concise in your comments and understanding truly what they're looking for to get out of your conversation in that time period.
Those are all extremely good lessons. Wish I had this conversation, this foresight, quite frankly, 15 years ago. So I think one of the things that our listeners are probably going to appreciate the most is those candid, transparent, soul opening, here's what I did wrong. I mean, I have more examples than we have time. Could you share an example of when you prepared, you were so sure that you were going to lock this down, and there are a few other things that you now know to account for, that maybe that's why the conversation didn't go so well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have these scenarios, Marnie. And when you're faced with these, you can learn more from these scenarios than any successes you're ever going to have. I would say early in my career, I was not a good listener. I built the agenda based on what I wanted to talk about, and I prepared solely for those agenda items rather than asking good questions to the client and truly understanding what they desired to get out of the conversation. And I did the same thing with leaders, quite frankly. And that you're not being an active listener is really hurting your agenda. So I would say one particular instance in a internal meeting, I thought I was ready to move on to the next step. And we always think we're ready, right? Especially if you're a high achiever. You always want to be pushing for more. But in this instance, I was definitely not ready. I was put into an interview realm where I was not properly prepared. And I kind of fell flat on my face in front of some of our top leaders. Now, gratefully, they realized I was young and maybe a little bit too overconfident and have been given subsequent chances. But I really think that instances like that can teach us that we really need to take a step back and observe others, leverage others that have been in similar seats, and what they can do to prepare for that next interview, that next conversation with a client.
I love it. And I think too, hopefully our listeners are hearing this and they're reflecting on pitches they made either to internal stakeholders or to customers, and learning from those and going in with a pivot, but not necessarily coming down. Because here's the thing, I mean, all great leaders say you cannot improve until you failed 100 times, right?
Absolutely. I would just expand on that in a little more color, is you have to recognize the failure for what it is. There's a great book by Annie Duke, and it's called Thinking in Bets. And it all talks about confirmation bias. And oftentimes when we have failures, we tend to just focus on the outcome of that it wasn't what we were wanting. But if we unfold it, there is good and bad in all the decision process that led up to that outcome. And if we look at that failure in the decision process as an opportunity to grow, then it's not a failure. it's something that can help you grow and develop and move you on for that next opportunity that was meant to be.
One of my first mentors and bosses, we actually interviewed him for an earlier segment. He coined the phrase, what we have here is a learning opportunity. And I actually think he was using it more for when he knew he was about to deliver feedback that I wasn't going to love. But because he phrased it in a learning opportunity sense, it became suddenly a challenge. So let's address an elephant in the room. You're a very young female in a very male dominated, sometimes good old boys club. I'm not saying at all your company, but let's be honest. I mean, the finance world, you walk into a room, you're young, you're always put together very professionally, but very well done. How do you get past the initial preconceived biases that people might have about you, especially when you're approaching, a multi-decade million-dollar client and you're about to educate them on the latest and greatest in securities?
Yeah, that's a great question, Marney. And something that I struggled with early in my career. I do think, by way of background, I'm the youngest of three kids by quite an age gap. So I'm used to being around older people. So that's definitely helped me in this arena. But I find that putting yourselves in the client's shoes or the leader's shoes can often help you in preparation. So, for instance, when in a job interview, oftentimes people are looking for experience and not necessarily looking for that person that has the young, fresh ideas. Now, I had a great line that was given to me by a friend in interview prep, and experience sometimes I think is one of the most overrated qualities in an interview process. And oftentimes you just need to realize that that's what they're looking for in the interview process. So experience can be tilted in a couple different ways. I think you can look at this as something I have experience in areas that older generations do not, like technology. I know that during this time, I've had clients reach out to me in technology woes and have looked for some tips, especially as we've gone to working virtually. I would also say the professional dress, while I know in the world of athleisure and comfort that we're living in, it does go a long way. I think if you always look polished and put together, it really says to your peers, your leaders, and your clients that you take yourself seriously and in turn take what you're doing seriously. I know that oftentimes at the beginning of your career, that really nice suit can be quite an expense to swallow. I really think you should treat it as an investment. Having that one really nice outfit for interviews, for when you're getting in front of these key stakeholders, really does go a long way. And then I think the fact that maybe leaning into those preconceived notions about you that are good ones. So, I have a preconceived notion amongst my organization. I'm always organized. I tend to be very polished in my statements. Lean into the good things, and that will outweigh the bad. I kind of think about it in cooking a little bit. If you put one of certain flavor in a hefty amount, it tends to overweight anything else. So I think we have to think about that in these preconceived notions, then focusing on the ones that might be not to our advantage. So oftentimes I am the youngest person in the room, and most of the time one of a few females. And I oftentimes thinking, acting as if that's not even a part of the conversation, just bringing your expertise and your knowledge to the table, they'll tend to forget about that and focus on the knowledge that you're bringing them.
Absolutely. And as long as it's not cilantro, I wholeheartedly agree with that cooking analogy. I just don't
Absolutely.
like it. Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about some wins, right? I mean, how did I look through, you've had several different roles as you've explored different areas of the organization, all with the goal to become regional vice president. And I know that there's many goals to come from there. Can we give some practical advice to the audience? So I'm sitting here, I feel like I've been passed up for a promotion, or I feel like maybe there's even a different department that I would be better suited for, or something interesting to explore. What are the next few things I can do to take that step?
Yeah, and I definitely would reference your previous episode with Dr. Cynthia Emery about advisors, mentors, and sponsors. If you haven't listened to that, and this is an area of your career you're looking for some guidance, she lays out some simple steps that can really help you. And then I would say beyond that, I think having continuity and a longer tenure at an organization helps a lot. I know my hiring managers, and I've talked to a lot of people in a hiring role, one of the key things that they look for in a resume is length of tenure at an organization. You really do need some time early in your career, especially to learn the ins and out of a certain company as well as your industry before you begin to search opportunities. I would say a couple tips I would give. Always be the commander in chief of your career. I think so many people, especially early in their career, think that their bosses are going to lay out this nice, neat path for them that they're going to be able to follow. Your bosses are supposed to be there to manage and help mentor you, but ultimately you are in the driver's seat. So if you want to explore a different department,
I love
if you
that.
want to look up, look at what your next step is within the department, or even a different career path, I definitely advocate for things that Dr. Emery talked about, such as finding a mentor, reaching out to somebody that can help you in that process. But ultimately, when you reach out to these people, you are in charge of these conversations. What are you wanting to get out of this? And you have to be in charge of it. So I would say simple examples is, writing a 5-year plan for yourself. And it doesn't have to be extremely detailed. It can be along the lines of, this is the role I would like to have. This is how much money I would like to be making. I'm a huge believer in visualization and goal setting and putting those to paper. We all have ideas in our head of what we want, but oftentimes, if we never put them to paper, those commitments fall into the dreams that never come true.
So getting back to talking about, exploring a new department, a new role, which I think we're seeing a lot more of. And what I love is I have this theory that our parents' generation, they found stable jobs, whether they liked them or not. But it was stability, right? It was financial stability because their predecessors came from the Depression era, and that's what mattered. What I love about the newest generation is they're finding things that are more social justice causes, things that they actually can personally get behind. So in all of this preparation, can you give us a few tips on, let's say I'm currently in accounting, but I think, hey, maybe business development, maybe sales, maybe supply chain would be good for me, and you don't know much about it. How do you approach that person? How do you identify the mentor?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been lucky. I've had some great mentors in my career, both internally and externally at VanEck. It's kind of like friendships or dating. You tend to feel naturally you have some type of chemistry or natural conversation with these people. I personally find it hard for it to just be a straight cold conversation of, I want to go right into exploring such and such topic. I think a lot of my great mentorships have evolved from previous conversations where we found, equal footing. I would also say raising your hand in an organization for special projects, such as being on volunteer committees or boards. I know that's becoming a larger thing at organizations as organizations are striving to be more green, more diverse in their hiring. Raising your hands for things like that gives you great access to other elements of an organization. I would say also leveraging your friends and your personal network to see if they know anybody that you can perhaps have a conversation with. If you have that one key person of connection already, it tends to flourish a lot easier. And then I would say in a mentorship, you have to understand, again, what I said to the beginning in Dr. Emery's comments, that you need to make sure that this mentor understands what your goals are and how they can help you. If you're just wanting them to be a soundboard, it's oftentimes going to fall short in your expectations because the other person doesn't understand what you really want to achieve out of their guidance.
I love that piece. They're not just a soundboard, right? I mean, that's what friends, family, maybe a therapist is for. So let's get back to some practicalities, okay? So we've talked about how to prepare for not only the internal pitch, whether it's promotion, sharing of information. We've talked about, pitching the customer. What are some things after the presentation? Because preparation is extraordinarily important, as is doing a great job, or at least, maintaining it on your feet during the presentation. What about after? Because it's the pull through, right? I mean, I think there's a phrase in basketball, when someone just isn't able, where they say, you just can't finish, right? And I may be totally slaughtering that analogy, but talk to us about the pull through.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great professor in college that said nothing happens in business until there's a sale. And so I often think about everything that happens in decisions in business as a sale. So I think when you close your presentation, finishing with what the next step is extremely crucial, whether that be a job interview or client facing. So when you close those conversations in a job interview, you would say, what is the next step from here? Or I really enjoyed our conversation. This is what I'm going to think about leaving this interview. I would like to know somewhat of a time frame or any expectations you would like to see from me in terms of your decision. So definitely always leave with definitive follow-up steps for yourself and for the client or the key stakeholder that you're appealing to. I would say in terms of it being a sale, it depends on where you are in the sales process, right? So if it's introduction, always try and figure out what is the next step in their due diligence process where you can lend a hand to make it easier, take a barrier out of the way or one of your objections out of the way. If you're a little bit closer to the end of the sales process, simply asking for the business. I mean, I know it's hard, but at the end of the day, these are business conversations. And if you've gone back for, however long your sales cycle is, ultimately, when it gets to the end of these conversations, you need to ask for that business. I would give a great anecdote of my first job interview ever. When I was interviewing for VanEck, I got down to the last stages of the interview. And mind you, I was still in college at the time, and I got a great piece of advice from a college professor that if you felt that it was a great fit for you, you need to ask for the job. And it got to my final conversation with my hiring manager at the time. I hadn't had the opportunity to speak with his boss, who typically likes to vet candidates. And I kind of went out with a bold statement. I said, I like it here. I think I can be a great cultural fit. Let's talk numbers. I think I would really like to come to work here. And he said, well, my boss tends to vet people. And I said, well, I'm going to be reporting directly to you. I think it's most important that you think I'm a fit. Do you not? And I think I took him off guard, but ultimately sometimes just closing is what the hiring manager, key stakeholder, is looking for to end a conversation.
The assumptive close. I love it.
Yes, absolutely. So, and especially in these entry-level jobs, I think at that point in my career, what did I have to lose? If they had said no, I was still going to be a senior in college. If they said yes, I got what I wanted.
Exactly. That makes sense. So in closing out, because I mean, let's be honest, we could sit here and talk about this for hours and hours and days.
Yes.
If you were to be mentoring someone and sitting down for coffee or lunch and you wanted to just inspire them to take control, to jump in and be, the executive leader of their career and take control of it, what would you leave our listeners with to inspire them to take that next step? Because let's be honest, change is scary, even if the change is asking to be, a promotion or to be put onto a new initiative. What would you advise?
I would say 5 years from now, do you want to be the same version of yourself or do you want to be the best version of yourself? And being the best version of yourself is going to require work, change, which makes you uncomfortable, and it is uncomfortable and it's difficult. But ultimately, if you don't take those steps, you're going to be sitting in the exact same spot as you are today. And quite frankly, life is far too short to not be growing and pushing yourself forward and enjoying the experience while it's happening. Being present in those moments is very important. And I really think that 5 years ago, you look back on where you were today. If you make those decisions, 5 years from now, you're going to be sitting in the seat a lot happier.
I love it. Well, as always, it was a treat to be able to speak with you. I can't wait to hear what the next menu option is. Maybe we should do a podcast on cooking and how analogous that is, as long as we're not using cilantro and maybe avoid butter. Thank you so much, Maryrose Burns.
Thank you so much, Marney. And I think I have a strong list of your food bugaboos at this point. So anytime we're happy to have you in our home for a meal.
Thank you.
Take care.